There we go. Looks like we should be going live now. Yeah, looks like we're good. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Just making sure that everything is kosher. Looks like everything's good. How do you do, ladies and gentlemen? It's nice to see you here. My name's Dustin Cormier, and you're watching an episode of How to Rock a Campfire. I've been away from How to Rock a Campfire for a little while, and it's nice to be back. I'm just signing into our comments here, because as you guys know, I always love to have a community vibe here when I do my videos. In today's episode, once I finally get it going, we are going to do our first little episode of How to Rock Bass. That's the plan for today. Hey, Goosey. I could have figured you'd be here, Goosey. Nice to see ya. My friend Goosey's always hanging out with me when I do live videos. Nice to see you got your bass plugged in and you're good to go. I think the first little bit of this video is, well, I guess I should say hi, everybody. Nice to see you here. I think the first little bit of this video is going to be me talking about a little bit of theory and stuff. Less about jumping into the bass first right away and just talking about our intentions for this series a little bit. This is How to Rock Bass. I'm a guitarist, as y'all know. I really started off with the guitar being my main thing. I've slunk into the bass like absolutely crazy in the last little bit of my life. I mean, for the past, I've really always been deeply interested in being a bass player, because for me it's the bottom of the waves. It's the thing that makes everybody's waves kind of like splash, you know? When in a musical group, everyone's really listening to the rhythm section, the bass player, and the drummer. At least the musicians are. And I wanted to be the one who was moving the musicians around, because the musicians and everyone, the singer, guitarist, lead people, are the ones who really get everyone going and get everyone dramatically and emotionally into the music. It's the rhythm section that, you know, is the bottom of the wave. I was always interested in that. So a little bit of our intention with these videos. My intention here on How to Rock Bass is to show the world what I consider to be what it is that makes a bass player a bass player. And we're going to get into the practical realities of 4 different things. I'm going to show you a picture of those in one moment just to really burn it in there, but I want to describe all the necessary theory that you need to be someone who is more than just a guitarist trying to be a bass player. A guitarist and a bass player are not the same thing. A bass player is different job. It's not a lead guy unless, you know, sometimes they can be, but there's a general theory of the bass, which is just different. Is everything good here? I'm just checking out the health of my stream. Yeah, the bass player just has a different role in the band, holding everything together. And they have their own sort of theory that I would like to sort of try to break out today as much as I can in a clear and possible way. Now, this is one episode. I plan to get out as much as I can here today. And then in the future, I'm going to put out more videos that have more supplementary things about, you know, regarding the bass. Talking about each of these individual things that we're going to talk about right now. Now, without further ado, I want to get going on this as much as I'm sure you guys do. So here is a little something of, I wish I could get a better picture of it. I swear I'm super prepared. Yeah. Today, our main concern is probably going to be more about the groove than anything. But as we go along, we in order to be a bass player, you really do have to have a sense of these four things. And in my opinion, you've really got to have the theory of guitar theory, note theory. The notes and intervals and scales, the chords, and the key signatures. Everyone thinks that it's simple to be a bass player, but it's really not. You got to dig on the bass that it might seem like there's less going on because you're hitting less strings, Da 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 da. Whereas the guitarist is going, they're doing all this like melodious stuff, and it seems like the bass is less complicated. But the truth is that if you mess up on the bass, everyone's gonna hear it. It's much more important for you to be right on the bass. Whereas the guitar, you're kind of allowed to have a little bit of swing. You can hit notes in the wrong places, and a good guitarist will be like, that was original, wasn't it? How that's not how the original does it. That was my way of doing it. Now, a bass player, of course, has their own signature that they can bring to every song. But even though the bass looks like it has less notes going on, the notes that the bass player has to play has to follow theory, just like everybody else. And there's only certain notes that sound good in a run. If you're like, there's lots of little interlude-y stuff that you can do in between landing on those main notes that we as bass players tend to hit. Right? That's like a scale. I'm doing like a scale there. And I have to know which notes that I can play in that scale in order to go in between those main chords. You'll notice that if I was playing with a guitar player now and we're doing like a punk thing like that, right? B minor, A, G, B minor, A, G. Now I know that it's in the key, it's in like B minor. That's just what I'm thinking in my head. I'm just making this up, really. So that means that when I do this little any of these things, it's gonna do the notes that are in B minor, right? Which is the same thing as the key of D, which has one F sharp and also the C sharp. So it's only got two sharps there. And I'm really doing like B minor pentatonic when I'm doing all these little. All that stuff is just me kind of riffing around with a pentatonic scale. And it looks like it's simple, but it really, you need to know what notes not to hit on the bass. And the reason I'm saying all this is because if you hit a wrong note on the guitar, you can make it work. You can make it like, oh, that was my original interpretation of this thing. But if you make a wrong note on the bass, everyone's not just going to hear it, everyone's also going to feel it. It's like the bass player is the massage. The guitarist and the singer are like the message. And you like mentally hear the message in a different way from when you're like up on stage and you're not up on stage. When you're right up close to a stage full of musicians and you're getting like the bass massage. If the bass player plays a wrong note, you're going to feel it. Like everyone's going to feel it. At this point, I'd like to refer a metaphor that I took from Victor Wooten. Victor Wooten's got a good little book on playing the bass. That's all about like the philosophy of the bass player. I highly recommend it. I can't even think of the darn name of it. It's like Victor Wooten is the guy. He's got a book, and you'll know what I mean if you look for the book on Amazon, because it's just like a well-known book of his. I read it like a few years ago. One of the deepest metaphors that I took was this idea that any band is like a house. You got this house, you've got a foundation for the house, and everyone sees the house. This is like the guitarist and the lead instruments, the people who do the treble side of things. You've got the brickwork of the house, the siding, the styles of the siding. You know, you can see like everything like externally about the house. But no one really sees the foundation. The foundation which holds that house together is underground. It's on a certain bricks, and it's got certain measurements. And you can hide an embellishment, like if you've got like a piece of brick that's like conked out or like is falling out, you know, you could put something on the face of that and you can hide a mistake in that realm. But if the foundation of the house has a crack in it, meaning the bass player, and the drummer too, the rhythm. If the rhythm section has a crack in it, the whole house will be cracked. The whole band will have a deep gouge in it, and you can't fix that. You know, if the bass player doesn't know what they're doing in a song, they're just, you know, and they have a bump, it's going to bump the drummer, and then the whole foundation of the band is going to go like this, and everyone is going to bounce on top of that in an ugly, gross sort of way, right? I'm just checking out my stuff here, yeah. So that's why it's important as the bass player, even though they're not doing as much, even though you can't see them as much because they're underneath the music, underneath the sound frequencies in a way. The truth is that everyone is hearing the bass player and the drummer more than they know. So it's important for a bass player to know what they're doing and to know the theory about what notes go together properly in a scale, in a song. Now lots of bass players do just sort of do what the guitarist is doing, you know, follow the main bass notes, what the guitarist is doing. And you can get away with that. Anybody starting on the bass can get away with that. Just follow the main chords that the guitarist is doing. Usually if a guitarist is doing like, you know, they're doing like bar chords, right? You can follow that first finger on the guitar, and you'll be able to follow whatever they got going on. But what I recommend, and why we're doing these videos today, is because I deeply recommend that as a bass player, you learn the basic foundational elements of what makes which notes go together well, the scales, the chords, the key signature. Once you figure these out, then when it comes to you playing the bass, you really won't even have to think about it. This, for me, what I'm trying to do with these videos is describe not just how to play songs. You know, I'm going to probably do some videos where I'll show me playing guitar and a chord, and then it's like, okay, you as the bass player, follow this, and I'll have us all going bum, 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 like to a CCR song or something like that. But I'd like you to know why it's appropriate for that CCR song for the bass player to have chosen just these notes. As a bass player, it's not really your job to show off. The bass player has there's a philosophy to the bass. You have to be kind of willing to serve everyone in the band. And, I mean, again, you can put your own signature in it, but a bass player is like the supporter that holds the whole band in a strong way. So you can't think that you all have to be too fancy all the time. The bass player often has a job where it's just something simple. You have to be okay with that reality. It's a bass player's job is to be a communicator for what is the intention of a song or of the band in general. Right? If the whole band is just trying to do some simple country tune, you can't be like and trying to push all these notes on a song that doesn't call for it, you know? So I would like you all to know why it is that bass players play the notes that they play. They make tasteful choices on the notes that they choose to play. They don't just go willy-nilly. Why is it? What are those notes that bass players are the foundational steps for every bass player to start understanding for themselves what is appropriate for a song. There's not really a science to that. You got to go by feel. What we're going to talk about today is that, we're going to kind of start off with the groove, as I said. In order to learn about groove, you can't really, teach it. It's kind of like in the ether. You just got to know that there's a groove that's implied and just play lots of different grooves. Once I start giving you some things to practice, what you need to do is practice them. Try lots of different grooves out. Eventually, you're going to hear a song and you're going to know what groove to play because it's going to be in your muscle memory because you've played so many grooves that when you hear a song, you're going to say, oh, okay, so it should probably be this type of groove, right? And then you build from there. And that's basically what we're going to do first for this first lesson. Here we go. Namaste, Dylan, and hello, Eric Floyd. Nice to see you guys here. Feel free to make any comments if you're watching live, any questions that you might want to ask, and I'll try to answer them as is pertinent to the conversation at hand. If I get any real whopper questions that I'll really want to get at, I'll either do it in the moment or maybe save them for later. But I will try to get at them as much as I can in this video. Now, basically, I've got a whole bunch of junk written down here, and I'm really just going by feel and getting as much out of the writing as I can and taking from it without being too stuck on the writing. Now, there was another darn thing that I was supposed to draw, and I didn't. I'll show you guys. We'll draw it out together. Now, there are 3 main points that we need as any musician, really, in order to learn what it is that we're trying to do. We've got practice, we've got theory. Oh yeah. Practice, jamming, and theory. I wonder if everybody can see this. Real freaking professional around here, folks. Yes. Practice, jamming, and theory. I just, it's nice when you actually see the words, separately, so that you can understand what I'm talking about. Now, I can't really teach you or force you to practice or to jam. I can show you practices, and I can show you ways of jamming. But, it's really up to you and your drive and your passion to just practice some things. There's some things that you can practice. There's really quite a few things. Scales, memorizing where your scales are on the bass. Just certain simple scales. Stuff like that. I'll be showing you certain riffs that you can play with and practice. And then you can take those riffs, those grooves, that was a groove, and play them in different keys, different key signatures. And that will involve you using different note intervals. These are all things we're going to talk about, but I'm just breaking it down for you, right? So I'm going to be showing you, to practice, for example, you can take a 1-5 riff, 1, 5, 1, 3, 5, 3, 1, 3, 5, 3. You can play that same thing. That's in the key of G, because we're starting on the G. You can take that same thing and do it in B flat. 1, 2, 1, first, third, fifth, third, first, third, fifth, third, first, ma, 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 ma. So that's something that we'll be able to practice once we start breaking down what it is that those things are made of. But I'm just showing you guys 1/3 of our schema here, which is practice, right? Practice as much as you can. Play songs when you can. Play songs on the bass if you know any. If even if you got to look it up on Tab Master or whatever. Tabs can be kind of cool. they're a good place to start, because then you can just start, then you have something to practice. I think a lot of bass players will probably be stuck at this place, and this is what I'm trying to build us up from. A lot of bass players will be stuck on this practicing songs that you can get off of tabs, whatever. The next step is to start jamming, ladies and gentlemen. It sounds simple, doesn't it? Oh, just start jamming. Duh, great. Now, what exactly does that even mean? It means playing with other people or other things. Now, I highly recommend just jamming with anybody that you can. Anybody that's got any kind of acoustic song that they know, that is a good vibe for them, that you feel like you could contribute to as the bass player. Oh, there's my buddy Goosey. Even like punk stuff, electric stuff, you know, just do what I was talking about. Follow the root note that your guitarist is doing in your band if you've got like a punk vibe going on, you know. Just get started there. What I'm more going to be trying to teach is like the notes in between, following those bass grooves, as well as for acoustic people. I want to show the bass guts of this acoustic stuff. So, jam with others on songs that you can memorize by practicing. Take a CCR song, you know, Who Will Stop the Rain? Something simple like that. Or what's that other one about the Bad Moon Rising? Simple song, right? I see the bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way. Well, don't go around tonight, 'cause it's bound to take your life, right? That's something that's pretty, I mean, there's a lot going on there when you look at it, but the chords are simple. I would love for you as a bass player to know the main elements of 1-5, for example, which is something that we're going to learn right away. 1-5 meaning playing the first of a chord and then playing the fifth note in a chord and the scale of that chord. You know, that's the first, fifth, first, fifth, first, fifth. That'll really get you started. Then listen to songs that you recognize having that groove, that specific groove. Find songs that have that groove and jam with them. First you practice them by yourself, and then go to your buddy's place who has a guitar, and you know, they just start doing the simple chords. You, with your theory, follow what they're doing on the guitar, especially if you kind of know the chords on the guitar, but you don't really have to. All you both have to do is speak the mutual language of the chords. So you go on the internet, you print off the lyrics for Bad Moon Rising, for example, and you write a D on top so that the guitarist looks at it and says, oh, a D. I know what that translates to in my musical language on the guitar, and he'll do a D chord. You know, we've seen them on the guitar, they kind of look like that, but lower down, right? And then the bass player says, good, so you know how to translate it in your musical language as a guitar player. Now me as the bass player, I have to translate this groove into my own musical language. And so once your guitarist starts going, you try to follow them, especially as a bass player. Usually everyone in the band follows the bass player. But when it's an acoustic jam, I find a lot of the times it's very much easier on the bass if you let the guitarist lead. It's going to be tough at first, but eventually the two of you will get a sense for how to jam with each other, right? Now that's what jamming's all about. The other part of jamming that I wanted to tell you, and for me this is a huge part of how you can expand on the bass. And I'm just going to show you basically some simple vibing stuff on how to do this kind of thing. I'm just going to put my camera here. Now, as you guys can see here, I've got a funk. I just basically looked up. What did I look up? YouTube drum loop, right? And I found this funk drum loop practice tool. It's the simplest. It's honestly the first one, obviously, as you can see, that came up. I go forward, and we've got this funk drum loop. Right? It's very simple, very chillin'. And what you as a bass player, I mean, like I could show off and show you a million things here, but I'm going to be showing you practices of how to practice jamming with something like this. There's lots of stuff that you can do there and have fun with. As you can see how I found that on YouTube, right? Just looked up YouTube drum loop, funk drum loop practice, bingo. Find this one as well as whatever ones that you can, you know? Whatever ones just sort of speak to you and seem like something that you would want to riff on. Because there's so many different ones out there. Now what you want to do is you take your learning from what you've done and you try to play along with what that drummer has going on. In terms of jamming, this is great practice for you to become like a band bass player. This is for kind of higher up. I'm kind of bringing together a beginner lesson here as well as intermediate and advanced, you know, like when you're an advanced bass player, you've gotten past the tab parts, you know a little bit of chord theory, and you can basically jam with anybody. The next thing you want to do is start mixing up all the different varieties of different flows and grooves that you've ever thought up and jam with something like that simple little funk drum loop. And this will give you the capacity to know the pathways on the bass. The bass, like any instrument, when you're learning to get in a groove, it's all about, you know, going through so many different grooves, doing it even if you don't know what the song is kind of supposed to be. You got a bunch of people at an open mic or a bunch of your buddies just hanging around playing guitar, and you happen to be the shy guy. It's like, hey guys, I can play the bass, and they're like, oh great. And you first get there, and you're gonna probably suck real bad because you've never done it before. Like with a group like that, you don't know what any of them are like or how they jam or whatever. You just watch. You stick to your theory. You rest intently on the theory that you've learned here or wherever else, and you start cataloging and registering in your muscle memory, in your genetic nervous system, all the grooves that you've ever played. You listen to what they've got going on, and then you just think of how you can add something to it. It's these pathways, these neurological pathways that are going to start to catch and blend themselves into whatever groove you feel like doing. It's like I always describe groove as like, it's like a dust squall. I'll bring this microphone back up here. Hopefully you guys could hear me for that bit. When you think of a dust squall, it's those little, you look in the desert and the wind, the hot and cold wind come together and they make a little cyclone. Now these happen all the time, but we don't always see them. We see it though when there's dust caught up in it. When there's a little dust tornado, you can see the dust in the shape of the cyclone. And because of the dust, you can see the cyclone. If the dust wasn't there, the wind would be invisible. Because the wind is invisible, but that doesn't mean it's not there. In the same way, it's hard to talk about the groove. It's hard to, like, you know, when someone's trying to teach a groove on the bass, it's like, okay, what you do is you hit the note with a quarter note, and then you let it come down, and then you wait another quarter note, and then you come up syncopated on the 4th, 5th, flat 6th, and 6th, or no, that'd be the 3rd, 4th, flat 5th, and then 5th, and then back to this note. All these words just to describe this. Boom. Like, how do you really describe it, you know? The groove is always there. It's like that tornado. And after you try on lots of different grooves, you're going to start to know the tornado even if there's no dust there. You're going to start to feel that there's a groove for this song, and I've done it before. Even though it wasn't exactly the same with whatever song is similar to it. You know, all musicians nowadays and forever are always just stealing from each other. Amateurs borrow, professionals steal. So every groove that you can think to do is probably a borrowed strand from somebody else anyway. It's what we all do. And if you want to be a bass player, you know, you got to start patching together your own quilt of grooves that are in your muscles, you're in your finger, your neurological memory. And that's how your own quilt is going to start to build up. You're going to start to see your own signature in your bass playing. Even when you play someone else's song and they intended the song to be this way, and then you start throwing your own thing in. You know, I mean, like, sometimes that's not appropriate, like I said. You don't want to show off as a bass player. But sometimes if it's what's called for in your group, if your group's like, you know, playing that old Elvis tune. Well, since my baby left me, I'll find a new place to dwell. Do-do-do-do at the Heartbreak Hotel. And I'll make it so lonely, baby. I'll make it so lonely. I'll make it so lonely I could die. Right? You could turn that if your whole group was like into it. You know, it's like, let's turn this into something a little bit hotter. And everyone's like, okay, well, what do you mean exactly? And then you go, all right, well, it's like this. Well, since my baby left me, I'll find a new place to dwell. Blah, blah, blah at the Heartbreak Hotel. Maybe damn, lonely, baby. I'll make it so lonely, baby. I'll make it so lonely, baby. I'll make it so lonely I could die. I don't know. I'm just fucking around right now. But you see my point. Like, it could be faster. It could have different notes going in between. Whatever is your signature that comes through in the center of all these different forms. There's a bass player in you that wants to come through. But it's never going to come through properly if you don't have the foundational elements of theory, chord structure, key signatures, scales, note intervals. So what I'm trying to say is that you could fake it till you make it. You can have lots of just all these different grooves and sort of memorize the hand movements towards them. But when it comes to writing a song on the bass or writing a song with a band and thinking like, what would a real professional bass player do here? You should really know your theory at that point if you really want to be a good bass player. Like half of this battle is groove and soul, and the other half is knowledge, dedication, sweat, work. You got to work for it to really get past that step on the bass where you're just memorizing what other people have done and being like a zombie that way. That's how you turn into a guitarist who is trying to be a bass player, you know? Because if you're just following what every guitarist does without thinking of how the bass can add its own thing, you're just going to be a guitarist posing as a bass player. In my professional opinion. Now, I'm going to show you this one more time just so you can see again where this video is going. We're going to start off talking a little bit about groove. Then we're going to go into, we do have to go to notes, interval, scales, and then chords, and then key signatures. These are all different layers, layers of everything on the bass. Excuse me. When you see a bass player doing something as simple as, again, Bad Moon Rising. I see bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way. Right? That's just going from D chord. The guitarist will be going D chord, A chord, G chord, D chord, do 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 do, A D chord, A chord, G chord, D chord. Right? Even though you're playing D A, because the D to the A is what we call an interval. So the groove is there. There's a groove here. There's a rhythm. There's a beat, right? The next step is defining what are the notes in, like, this is within the chord, right? So we've got the first and the fifth of D. Okay, this is the key of D. That's where it's all starting from, really. But, you know, we could say it starts both ways. We could start at the key signature or we could start at the groove. but we end in the same thing, which is the middle, which is the music. So we've got a groove here, and we've got the first note in the D scale, the D scale being do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. The D is the first, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 1, 2, 8, 7, 6, 5. I hope you guys see what I mean here, is that the A is the 5th in the D scale. So that's why when we do this groove, we're playing the first note, the first interval of the D chord, and the 5th interval, this interval of the D chord. I wonder, I mean, this might seem confusing to a lot of you, but it's not so confusing once we kind of break it down a little bit. So we start off talking about the groove, whatever that might be. We talk about the notes that are inside the chord for that groove. You know, we could even do this song. Same chords. Let's say it's same chords. Same chords, same key, right? So D. I hear double overflowing. 1, 3, 5, 3. I know the end is coming soon. 5, 1, 3, 5, 3. So that's the first note, D. Do, re, mi. That's the third note, which is F sharp in the D chord. First, third, fifth. First, third, fifth, third, first, third, fifth, third. But when you listen to this, it's 3 different notes, but it's actually one chord. And the chord comes from the first note that you land on. D, 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 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4. Now G, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, D, 2, 3, 4, A, 2, 3, 4, G, 2, 3, 4, D. I'm seeing my face like, I'm a goof. Now you can see here that there's, you as a bass player, you don't need to memorize the scales, but you should. And that's what I've been saying the whole time. It's different layers of professionalism for every bass player. If you want to just learn the basics, then just follow the first note, that being D, and learn this groove. This is a groove that you can practice. First, third, fifth, third. So what that is like, you know, you start on the first note. Whenever you do any kind of groove, you want to have your fingers situated so that they're ready for the notes that you're going to play in the groove. For this particular groove, I start with my middle finger on the note that I'm going to play, this one right here, on the note that I'm going to play. And then I use my first finger to go, if it's 1 fret behind that one, right? So you can see that I've got each of my fingers situated in the groove where they're going to be used. My third one is there just in case I want to hit this first fret after my second finger. But it's, you know, the pinky being 2 frets down is what's important for that 5th note. Because then we can go first, third, right? I'm hitting the next string below. First, third, 5th, third, first, third, 5th, third, do, 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 do. And then you can take that chord, that being the first note of that groove. You can take that to another chord. You can bring it to the C. Do, do, do. And then back to the D again. I'm hoping this is loud enough for you guys. Let me know if you can't hear that bass. Although you should. Decided to turn it up just in case. Right? Now the point is that there's an chord structure implied here, right? The only way to describe this, I've got my guitar here, so let's take a moment to just digest, because I'm showing you guys all the layers of a bass composition like this, right? We're going, so this right here, even though we're playing 3 notes, let's memorize our terms. These notes, 1, 3, 5, 3, D, F sharp, A, F sharp, D, F sharp. You don't have to memorize that. It's better to memorize the distances between the notes. These are the key codes that are going to start getting you able to play any key, any chord in any key. You don't want to memorize D, F sharp, A, F sharp. You don't memorize them by the notes, because there's so many of them, and if you're trying to lean on the notes, it's not telling you anything about the chord structure or the key signature. It's the key signature that gives you the clue. So that, if I'm a bass player, someone looks at me and says, this is just a boogie groove in D. Okay? I'm like, I kind of sort of know what you're talking about, but get it started. And then they all start playing, and I go, okay. So this is a boogie groove, which is basically this one. Right, so that was the same notes, same intervals. First, third, fifth, third. I start on the first from the first, and then I start on the fifth note, or then I go to the third note from the first. Do, re, mi. And it's always the same distance from each other. The third note is always going to be up one string and back one fret, right? This is my D. I'm going to go to the third. I'm going to go up one string to the next string and back one fret. Up one string, back one fret. So that distance is the same here as it is here when I do the same groove in a different chord but with the same intervals. Right? Now, I don't want to memorize that this is G, B, D, B. I mean, I do. You do. But when you're thinking about it in the moment, you're not thinking G, B, D, B. You're just thinking, this is the G chord now, same groove, which means the same scale intervals. First, third, fifth, third, first, third, fifth, third. And then back up to the first, third, fifth, third, first, third, fifth, third. So in the same way that we have the groove, which has its scale intervals, there's also the intervals of the key signature. Okay? So if someone looks at me and says, okay, so this is a boogie groove, and it's going to be 12-bar blues. I know that the boogie groove is for every chord, no matter what the chord, is going to be first, third, fifth. First, third, fifth, third, first, third, fifth, third, first. I'm going to get you guys to play this with me if you have a bass with you, or I know my friend Goosey does. I'm just going to give you guys the space to learn what I'm talking about, but I want to flesh it out a bit in this moment. The key is D. The groove is the boogie groove. Now we know that in every chord in this key, it's going to be the same groove. First, third, fifth, third, first. Now those are the intervals of the chord. We also have to think of, when we're jamming, the structure of the song is built up on the intervals of the key signature. I'm talking real slow so that you can understand the different terms that musicians use, because this is important as a bass player when communicating with other people what the groove is going to be. So we've memorized the intervals of the chord, the boogie groove. Now the next question is I look at the other musician, the guitarist, and I say, okay, what is the chord structure of the key? And they'll say, well, it's in D, we know that. And then they'll say, you go from the first chord, it's 12-bar blues, okay? So a 12-bar blues, basically, you start in the first chord, which in our case is D, and then you go to the fourth chord, okay? Now the fourth chord from D, well, let's count. Do, re, mi, fa. 1, 2, 3, 4. Your do, re, mi scale, which is a scale that we have to learn once we get into the scales and intervals. That's very key for knowing the intervals of the chord as well as knowing the intervals of the chord structure or the key signature. Chord structure and key signature are kind of the same thing in a way. So we know that our guitarist said, boogie groove, key of D, you're going to go 12 bar blues. Okay, so that means we're in the first chord for 2 bars, 2, 3, I guess that would be 4. Okay, sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and then 1 again. Start back on the D again. So our chord progression, this is a different, when we talk about 1, 4, 5 now, we're not talking about the individual chord. We're talking about the spaces between the chords, okay? So we know that D is our first. 1, 2, 3, 4, G. D, E, F sharp, G. We're climbing up the D major scale because the key of the song is in D. Our guitarist said that. The song's in the key of D. Got it, right? Now, that means when we find the other chords, it's going to be in the D major chord progression that we find them. So we go from the first 12 bar blues, goes first chord, fourth chord, first chord, and then fifth chord, fourth chord, first chord again. Don't let me lose you or confuse you. This is just part of the language of being a musician. We speak more in numbers than we do in anything else, because numbers are like the true reality of, like, math is like the true reality of music. So let me just get out this point. Is that this song in 12 bar blues has the D chord in it for 4 bars. 3, 4. Now we're going to do the same chord. We just did 4 bars of the D chord. Now we're going to go to 2 bars of the G chord, and then another 2 bars of the D chord. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now that was 8 bars in total. 8 bars of what? 12 bar blues in the key of D, which means the first chord is D, first chord, first chord, first chord. Now we go to the fourth chord, which, remember, G is the fourth from D. So now we go to the fourth chord. Fourth, fourth. Now back to the first chord for 2 bars. First chord. Now the A is the fifth from D, right? Remember, we talked about that when we were talking about this groove. And even just the basic scale, the boogie woogie is the first chord, the third, the first note, the third note, and the fifth note. And try not to be too confusing with these terms. We know that A is the 5th note in the key of D. First, second, third, fourth, fifth. D, E, F sharp, G, A being the 5th. So that means that when we go to the 5 chord, our first note is going to be the A, because A is the 5 note. So for 12 bar blues, we go 5th chord for 1 bar, then back to the 4th chord for 1 bar, being the G, and then the D again. Right? So that's first chord, 2 bars, 3 bars, 4 bars. Now the 4th chord, 1 bar, 2 bars, I guess I should say the 5th bar in the 12-bar blues, 5 bars, 6 bars. Now back to the first chord, 7 bars, 8 bars. Now 5th chord, 9 bars, 4th chord, 10 bars, and then the first chord again for 2 bars. First chord, 11 bars, 12 bars, and then start again, first chord, right? And then that's when we complete one cycle of the 12-bar blues in the key of D with a boogie woogie groove. Now, to show you the fun of what I'm talking about here, what if your guitarist looks at you and says, you know, we're doing this a little bit too low. I think it would be better for our singer, who is used to singing higher. Let's let our singer, give our singer a bit of grace. Let's do this song in the key of E. Okay? New key signature. Key of E. Guitarist said so. So we're in the key of E. What's our groove? We're not going to change it because we're keeping the same groove. So that means that it's going to be 12-bar blues in the key of E. Now, what am I going to do as a bass player? This is the code. This is the secret code of bass players. That is like how bass players know what to play on which song. This is it right here. We're going to do the same groove, except now we're going to do it in the key of E, which means E is our starting note. Now, do I have to tell you what each of these individual notes are? E, G sharp, B, G sharp, E, and, you know, that might confuse you. Especially when, you know, well, we'll get to that part, but it's the same groove, which means in the E chord, when we get here, that's our new first chord in the key signature, in the chord structure. When I play that E note, that's the first, so I'm going to go first, third, fifth, third, first, third, fifth, third. Now, same thing when I go to the 4th chord, which is now A, because we've moved everything up one whole tone, right? Are you following me? The 4th chord was G before down here. Now we're moving everything up 2 frets, because we've gone from D, moved up to D sharp and to E. That's two notes that we've gone up in our key signature. So now we're in the key signature of E. Same groove. Let's go through the 12-bar blues just so you can see what I'm talking about. First chord, E. 3 bars. 4 bars. Okay? 4th chord. First chord. 5th chord. 4th chord. First chord. I kind of fucked that up, but you see what I mean. There's an implied, we're doing first, third, fifth. That's our boogie woogie in the chord, but the chord can be moved around to different places. And that's what I'm trying to describe with this little picture here. We've got the groove, we've got the notes inside the chord, and then we've got the chords inside the key signature. We've got the groove, we've got the notes inside the chord, and we've got the chord inside the key signature, right? It's like a little bit of a Russian doll vibe going on whenever we talk about the breaking down the elements of the bass, okay? That was a pretty good hash up of all of those 4 elements. And I hope you guys can dig that I was really trying to break that down in that way for everybody to see the breakdown of what makes up the elements of the bass. So that was our first video in this little breakdown. I like to call it an introduction. Now the next thing I would like to do, I'm going to check if I've got any comments first, any questions. Feel free to ask them now because I'm gonna look at our comments and we're going to go through them a little bit. After that, we're going to close this video, and we're going to start up episode 2, How to Rock Bass, episode 2, right now. Like, I'm with you guys. I want to have this live stream go for a while. But we're going to break up the videos into a bit of a series so that when people come, they're like, okay, they got this piece of it. The next video in the series is going to be groove. We're going to talk about groove. We're going to go into a few bits of what it's all about, and we're going to focus on it for this coming video. Let's see. Oh, there's my buddy Jack. Oh yeah, that's a good one, Goosey. Thanks, CN. My buddy Jack. I appreciate that. Shy Bond. Thank you so much. I guess that's a little bit better now. Crazy Train. Yep. Very good, Goosey. Interval. Intervals. I guess most people say intervals, right? Now, for some reason, I've got some fancy transition thing that I would prefer not to have. There we go. Did that fix it? Nah. Whatever. I guess we're zooming. So, thank you for watching, everybody. My name's Dustin Cormier. I hope you guys enjoyed this first bass lesson. Stay tuned. Feel free to check out the next episode in this series where we're going to focus on talking about the groove.